There was this meeting at the White House on December 21st where you discussed Jan 6 strategy, whether Pence would take some sort of unconstitutional action. Reporting said it lasted several hours. What did you advocate in that meeting at the White House in December 21?
Nothing. I was seeking to understand the process because this was unprecedented. We expected that Senator Hawley would be joining House objectors, and we didn't know whether that would result in one unicameral debate, if the Senate and the House would retire to their respective chambers to debate, who would preside over those various debates, how people would be recognized. So it was a very friendly meeting. Vice President Pence was there. Vice President Pence, in fact, encouraged the debate. He said the debate was something that needed to happen, and he laid out his plans to entertain that. Unfortunately, violence and riots really obstructed the work that we wanted to do to have a substantive debate on election integrity.
Did you hear anything in that meeting that you considered unconstitutional or illegal?
No.
Okay. Then why, after that meeting, did you seek a pardon for yourself and others who attended that meeting?
That's been misreported. What I've suggested is that there were various groups of people that President Trump was considering pardoning for a variety of reasons. And I was very involved in a number of pardon negotiations. Some of those were granted, like the Blackwater Four. Some, went a different direction, like Joe Exotic. But in that particular discussion, there was nothing that emerged where anyone sought a pardon. I will say, we see a Department of Justice that seems to be pretty weaponized against
we can do both,
people.
But just to be clear, you're denying that you sought a pardon for yourself?
Yes, that's correct.
Here's some of the under oath testimony from Trump insiders, and I know you've maintained a strong relationship with Donald Trump, but basically, we've got multiple people, the director of White House presidential personnel, who's a Trump loyalist, lawyer Eric Hirschman, Cassie Hutchinson famously. We could put this up. They all testified under oath that you specifically requested a pardon. And I'll play a little bit of the sound on this. Here was the lawyer out of these three discussing it in testimony. Take a listen.
The general tone was, we may get prosecuted because we were defensive of the president's positions on these things, as broad as you could describe. From the beginning, I remember from the beginning of time up until today, for any and all things. You mentioned Nixon, and I said Nixon's pardon was never nearly that broad.
That's some of the testimony. To give you the benefit of responding, since I have you here tonight, here's what some others said in the hearing, MTG discussing just generally that meeting, and then others describing that. Take a listen.
Said we've got to have a meeting. There's many of us that feel like this election has been stolen.
On December 21st, some Republican members of Congress met with President Trump in the White House to talk about overturning the 2020 election.
Mr. Gates was personally pushing for a pardon, and he was doing so since early December. Advocated for there to be a blanket pardon for members involved in that meeting.
I want to give you the benefit of responding to it, but I also want to take this process seriously. So respectfully, you have individuals who are not known to be coordinating in any way. They all have their own counsel. They have an incredible legal liability if they lied about this. And multiple individuals, all of whom, by the way, Republican appointees, are testifying that in that period, after that December meeting, you, sir, requested a pardon for yourself and other attendees at the meeting. And so the question is, can you really say that all of them are committing perjury, lying on you, A, and B, if a pardon was requested, why not just tell us what were you worried about? What was it that you thought you or others might be indicted for?
Well, I mean, Cassidy Hutchinson is a known liar. There's testimony she's given that directly results in perjury. So I would certainly take exception with her testimony. I do not remember it the same way Eric Hirschman does. I did have conversations with Eric Hirschman about different groups of people that could potentially receive pardons, even including some of the people who may have committed a technical violation of federal law, but that weren't engaged in violence on January 6th.
So
I guessed hold on now.
Mr. McEntee, no, I'm going to let you finish, but is Mr. McEntee a liar as well? And yes, no, you may finish.
Well, I had a lot of conversations with Mr. McEntee about pardons for other folks and different groups of people. Whether or not some lawmakers would have fallen within those groups, I think, could be debated and discussed. But when it comes to, was I asking something specifically for me and only me under those circumstances, the answer would be no.
Did you advocate a pardon for other lawmakers to Mr. McEntee or others?
No, there were discussions about pardons for President Trump, his family members, his allies, and presumably members of Congress could have fallen in that group. But there was nothing in the January 21st meeting that would have resulted in any need for a pardon because we had Mike Pence there. He was present for the meeting. He was friendly and I think very accommodating to our request to just know information about how the floor would play out that day. Most of the floor action in Congress is very scripted. This was going to be unprecedented, and we wanted to make sure we understood how he intended to proceed from a procedural posture.
Well, Vice President Pence's attendance doesn't cancel out if somebody tried to plan or conspire or attempt a crime any more than Donald Trump is under investigation in Georgia for calling an elections official, and the allegation is potentially that he was conspiring and that person was resisting. I mean, if Pence was
right,
resisting,
but Mike Pence wrote a book about all the things that he objected to that were a pressure campaign against him, and this January 21st meeting does not make an appearance in that book. And so I think it shows you that Pence did not view this as some sort of criminal pressure or some sort of attempt to view things differently. We obviously now know, with the benefit of time, that Mike Pence took a different view than some of the people who attended that meeting, and if that was some source of criminal behavior, I think you'd be hearing from the vice president that that was the case. But of course, it was more about process, and that's why it wouldn't ever have been the subject of a pardon request from anyone.